Members, we now have quorum, so I will declare the meeting of the City Community Services and Culture Committee open and advise that this meeting will be recorded and streamed live to the City of Adelaide website. Please note that an audio and visual recording is being taken of this meeting. This means that your presence at and any contribution you make to the meeting may be collected, used, disclosed, or published publicly by the Council, including transferring outside of Australia. As time is past 8:30 p.m, I seek to leave the meeting to continue past 8:30 p.m. Moved by, is it show of hands? Show of hands? Yep, pass. Leave granted. Council acknowledges that we are meeting on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains and pays respects to elders past and present. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land. We acknowledge that they are of continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today. And we also extend that respect to other Aboriginal language groups and other First Nations who are present today. Apologies and leave of absence. We've just got a leave of absence from Councillor Kabada, I believe. Confirmation of minutes. I now seek a mover and a seconder. Councillor Abraham today, and seconded by Councillor Freeman. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Do any members have or wish to make a declaration of a conflict of interest? No, no deputations, no workshops. We'll go straight into 7.1, the cricket net relocation, and I'll pass on to Joe Padolia.
Thank you. And through the chair, I'll hand over to Ms. Kalionis to take us through the key highlights and then open up for any questions.
We've got a move by the Lord Mayor. Do people want to move forward? Seconded by Councillor Abraham today. All those in favour? Yeah. Unanimous. That is passed. Straight on to our best work ever, team. 7.2, the City of Adelaide Dog and Cat Management Plan. Joe, once again, would you like to take it away?
Yeah, before handing over to Steve, I'll probably just make an opening remark that this paper seeks to go out to public consultation to hear the public's view of our dog and cat management plan. And I'll just hand over to Steve for a few further remarks before opening for questions.
Thank you, Joe, and through the chair. So as Joe said, what we're seeking tonight is your endorsement to go out to public consultation for the draft plan. Just to recap what's in the report, but you'll notice there is a delay in the commencement of this plan from when our previous plan expired in 2024. So there's been some legislative amendments throughout 24-25, which we've wanted to wait, strategically wanted to wait and talk to the Dog and Cat Management Board about that to make sure that those legislative amendments have occurred, which now have. So the plan in front of you for public consultation doesn't propose anything materially different to how we approach animal management in the City of Adelaide, but seeks to really build on those foundations and continue the work throughout to 2026 to 2030. And what we'll seek to do, following questions, and if it's endorsed tonight, is go out and get the public's view through consultation. But I'll throw it open to questions from there.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Look, the only issue I have is about, apartment living. And also, we're obviously pushing for, increased population, and that's probably going to be in apartment living. Is the consultation addressing that, that point? Could we actually flesh that out more with residents?
Through you, Chair, do you mean, so will the consultation reach people in apartment living?
Well,
is that your
but
question?
also the types of questions around, apartment living and pet ownership, and also the ramifications of that with barking and, that sort of thing. I mean, with our population target, that's going to be a greater, risk, I guess.
Through you, Chair, thank you for the question. So certainly a lot of our communications around educating and encouraging responsible pet ownership, whether that's social media or how we're communicating, does target those living in apartments and townhouses, and that's some of the responses that we get in terms of community requests. What I can do is take on board how we engage those people in the consultation process to make sure that they are being targeted, and we are speaking to those people throughout the development of the plan. There's nothing that specifically targets apartment living versus not.
Yeah,
but
because there is a difference, pet waste and, all sorts of things like that. That's going to be a bigger issue down the track, I think.
Councillor Freeman.
Thank you, Chair. Just building on what Councillor Noon, Deputy Lord Mayor, was just saying, I agree. I think considering where we're going, we do need to think about what's the differences between having a pet in an apartment versus a house. And it's not just the policy, and I'm sure you get feedback during the consultation process that will help you refine the plan, but also I'm interested in the data we collect and, you know, of the 1,000 dogs registered, how many of them are in apartments? Because what that will tell us is in people that live in apartments rely on parks and the park lands, and they need to have facilities for their pets. And, you know, I don't know if there's any doggy bags in Light Square, let's say. I think that we need to have that data to understand whether we're actually servicing people in that kind of dwelling. So that's one thing. And I guess in terms of that richness and granularity of data, we have a 50% residential population that are renting. I suspect a lot of them probably aren't registering their pets. Does that cause problems and we're going to have less control than we would like? Maybe. I don't know how easy it is, or even if it's possible for us to gain an understanding of unregistered pets. But I wonder if through rental agreements or something, do you need to identify if you've got one? I'm just asking, is there any way of adding granularity to the data?
Thank you, and through the chair. So we've got more data probably than what's in here around where our registered pets are located, and based on that, where are they in apartments? Are they in so we've got that information there that's able to be used. We know from research, and your point is correct, you never necessarily know 100% of unregistered pets, but based on our research, our work with other councils, we're confident that we've got a large percentage of our pets are registered. And we also know from the data, from the surveying data we do at dog parks and whatnot, that we do know while we've got, which I think might be in the report, while we've got around 1,100, we know a lot more pets visit the City of Adelaide and our various facilities. So when we're tracking dogs wandering at large, dog attacks and those sort of things, we also track, are they actually registered to the City of Adelaide or not? And quite often they're not. So part of our role is working with those other councils and how we encourage responsible pet owners, not just in the City of Adelaide, but those that are visiting there. So I can think about how we provide some of that more granular data to you coming forward, because it might not necessarily be in the plan, but there might be ways we can show that too.
Yeah, and I guess in the plan itself, maybe if there's if it's sort of sectioned into the different types of living in the city. So if you're an apartment resident, you can go to your section of the plan, what you can expect. So you're probably going to hear the dog barking next door. When is it actually a nuisance? And when is it within the plan? And the bylaws, and again, like it's sort of quite different depending on what you live in. I'm not suggesting you have to make any changes now, but during consultation, when that closes, maybe that can be considered. And then just the final comment, which we were talking about just before, I imagine you may get some questions about why we're not mandating cats being contained. So I guess, yeah, what you explained to me before, Steve, we don't have that many cats in the City of Adelaide compared to other council areas. It's hard to enforce, etc., but just making the comment that people may ask why we haven't considered that, because it is responsible cat ownership, but everyone has different views on that.
Lord Mayor.
I'm shocked that nobody complains about dog faeces, because to me that's a health hazard and a safety hazard. And I'm also shocked by the change that seems to have occurred in that we seem to allow dogs in playgrounds. There's a key on the diagram that says dog on leash at all times within a playground and within 5 metres of children's playground equipment. I'm just outraged by that. No dog should be in a playground because they do defecate, and there are particular diseases that can be spread by dogs, particularly in Australia. I'm just appalled. I think that there should surely be something about faecal contamination. I get lots of messages from an ex-council member who lives near Hutt Street, who sends me an SMS every time she sees dog faeces. So I'm perhaps sensitised to this, but...
Through the chair, I can take some of that on as feedback. There's been no recent change in terms of the on leash on playground areas, but we can consider...
It used to be banned.
Consider...
because of the risk of parasites.
And we do get reports, so it's not that we don't get any reports. We do get reports, and we follow up. It's often, I think I've heard you talk about testing at some point. It's often hard to find out after the fact where the responsible parties are, but it is something that does come up that we do need to manage.
I know there's no support for DNA testing faeces, but it's the obvious way of tracking the dog down. So I'll move the motion as printed, though.
Councillor Couros had a question, I think.
I'm just very confused over the commentary. So what my understanding is, this is just about dogs on leash and being a nuisance. Are we talking about where doggy bags go and where dog fountains go and where dogs can do their business? Is this what this report's about? Because
So no, it's about broadly around dog and cat management. Now, what we put into a plan is up to council. There are certain, so not every dog and cat management plan for every council is the same, but it is more than just on and off leash areas. That's part of what we deliver in terms of how we respond to dog and cats. But so it's not just about any one thing.
right, and so, but within, if a complaint's within apartments in regards to that, that would be under a strata corporation in handling what the dog complaints would be under their bylaws and things like that. That's got nothing to do with us, though. Is that right?
Depending what the complaint is. So if there's noise complaints, so strata corporations, through your chair, sorry, if strata corporations may have their own agreements and what can and can't be allowed in a strata corporation, but if there's animal-related nuisances or issues around dogs barking and things like that, they will come to council. We'll get those requests and then work out how we deal with them and manage them.
Right, well, I just want to highlight that within the report that you how good it is that the dog attacks has reduced, and I think that that's a good sign. And I have to say that there's plenty of parklands area for dogs to run around in without a leash, and I think we're very lucky to have that. So great report, thank you.
Councillor Martin, and then Councillor Martin.
Yeah, look, I was just wondering, through you, Chair, why, given that the state government is going to propose further changes in 8 months, if I've read this correctly, why we're moving to change this now when it expired 18 months ago anyway. Is there a legislated requirement to act quickly, or?
Through you, Chair, so not a legislative requirement to act quickly. I'm not sure the part you're talking about with state government acting again.
Yes, the paper says that the state government is considering further changes to be introduced by the end of the year, I thought, but I could have read that incorrectly. It's very tiny print.
There are potential for more changes coming, but it has been quite a time in getting to the changes that have occurred. So while there's no burning platform to get something happening right now, because our bylaws do remain current, the previous extension, so councils are legislatively obligated to have a plan. The fact is, at the moment, we don't have a plan. The Dog and Cat Management Board can't extend our plan any longer because they no longer approve plans as part of the new legislation. So we think it's timely, now that the core bits of legislation have changed, is to progress the plan, which is why we're going with it now.
A further question, if I may, Chair. I was a bit shocked to read about the number of dog attacks. It's almost 100, I think 92 or something like that, in the last 2.5 years. Do we know whether those attacks were serious, resulting in injury, or were they lesser attacks? I mean, do we break them down into serious attacks resulting in injury or whatever?
Through you, Chair. Yeah, we can provide potentially some of that information because, yes, the things we break the data down by is seriousness, also whether it's attack on another animal or a person, and so we have those that information that we report on that we have available that we might be able to share.
And I know that our policy, and it says at 6.2 that our policy is to change behaviours through education, but it doesn't articulate any response to attacks. Do we, in the case of where a dog has attacked someone, the owner has been identified, do we prosecute or just educate or warn or?
Through you, Chair, depending on the circumstance. So each of the options you've said, there are examples in the past 12 months where we've done education. you do need a substantial amount of evidence to prosecute, and we have prosecuted before. The orders that are around dog attacks, enforcement orders, at the most severe are destruction orders where the dog is put down. There can be other things in terms of training, muzzling, and a range of things that can occur that we have prosecuted successfully, or enforced, I should say, successfully in the past. So it's dependent on the circumstance and whether it's repeated and what happens there.
And just one final question. Is that an unusual incidence of dog attacks? 102.5 years, about one a week or slightly less? Yeah.
Not unusual, through your chair, not unusual. What we do know is that and the surveys, we're not out there counting at all times, but we do know a large percentage of these happen in the parklands and dog parks where there are a large amount of animals visiting. And so we encourage activation and we encourage these places to be vibrant, but then that does open it up to attacks.
Thank you.
Councillor Ma.
Thank you. I've got 4 questions, I think. Question 1, any cat attacks? This is a serious question. Have we had any cat attacks?
There's 20 cats.
Not reported that I'm aware of, but I'd check. I'd need to take it on notice to get an official response. I don't believe so. Yeah.
The dog bylaws refer to dog-free areas. A person must not allow a dog to be in a dog-free area. An area is defined as somewhere that council has resolved. This paragraph applies to. What is that? What's the resolution the current resolution that defines what a dog-free area is?
So there's you're not talking about dog on-leash areas and dog off-leash areas?
No, on-leash, which is clear. Mm-hmm. So the bylaw defines what a dog-free area is, which is anything that the council has resolved is a dog-free area. So what is that?
It's a good question. So we're not proposing for it to change as part of this, but if you're wanting to know what has been designated before, outside of the dog on-leash and on-leash, I'll take it on notice and be sure to
Because I think that actually answers the Lord Mayor's question earlier about dogs in play spaces. The bylaw allows us to move a resolution that excludes them from play spaces.
And so that is certainly within council's power, as is reviewing the on-leash and on-leash areas, on-leash and off-leash areas at any time. Absolutely.
So this would be quite a simple change if we were going to do what the Lord Mayor suggested. It would not be difficult. Through
the chair, in my experience, anything around dog on-leash and off-leash areas generates a lot of community interest. So technically, easy to do.
That's what I mean. Technically
easy.
It's
not but then it's a process. I think we didn't want to engage the community and go through that process if we were going to change anything to do with on-leash and on-leash areas.
Yeah, that's right. I had other questions, but I've decided they're not important. Thanks.
Are you moving, Councillor Freeman, or you got another question?
I can do both.
Go for your question first.
Okay, sorry, just one final question. So 6.1 of the plan, community education and information, which talks about, it just sounds like it's reiterating the responsibility to the owner. My experience as a resident is that I think there should also be education for neighbours. So I've lived next to 4 dogs and 7 cats, all at the same place. And my neighbour wasn't aware there's a bylaw preventing that. I also wasn't aware of that at the time. I think it's good for people to just have that shared understanding of what actually is and isn't permitted. And who do you contact when you're concerned about something? Council are only, I've learned from, again, a personal experience, that you're really only empowered to operate against these bylaws and this plan, and like if a dog's wandering around you can collect it, but if there's concern about the well-being of a dog in a yard, council has nothing to do with that really. I'm not sure if people know who to contact in the first instance, and this plan could make that really clear. So if you have an issue about this is who you should speak to. It might be the RSPCA or someone else, SAPOL, I don't know. Yeah, I think just maybe the education part of this, maybe not so much the plan, but the subsequent comms we produce has an opportunity to make these rules clearer.
Councillor Marr, final question.
Just one final question. Again, in the dog bylaw, with the limit of dog numbers, 1 dog in a small dwelling, 2 in anything other than a small dwelling, how many instances are there of disputes about the definition of small dwelling, because that's actually quite broad. Self-contained dwelling, commonly known as an apartment flat, service flat, home unit, or the like. Or the like's pretty broad, so we could say you can only have one dog, and they might say no, but I don't have a small dwelling. How many times has that happened?
I don't know, through your chair, I don't have the exact number, a very minimal amount of time. Most of our bylaws are model bylaws that most councils have in place, and so it's not a conversation that happens regularly at all. I'm not sure if we keep the data on how many times it come up, but yeah, not here.
Okay. Can move if you want.
Councillor Noon.
Just a quick one. The LGA, they actually have a cat and dog management board, don't they?
The dog cat management board
Yeah,
is
The state, is it? It's not LGA, they Okay, because that comes around and they ask the councils. Ah, okay. Oh, I was just letting everybody else know.
Okay, moved by Lord Mayor, seconded by Councillor Freeman. All those in favour? Unanimous, thank you. And thank you, members. I appreciate your time. This is my first meeting back since my leave of absence. I hope I didn't make a dog's breakfast out of it. Thank you.
So can I just, they were banned in playgrounds when I was on.
What, say that again? Elsie? Just exactly that? Yeah, just a show of hands. Okay. Hello, people, can we sit down? Hello? Lord Mayor? Members? People?
Rebecca, you're distracting the Lord Mayor.
Sit. Okay, I declare the meeting of the City Planning, Development and Business Affairs Committee open and advise that this meeting will be recorded and streamed live to the City of Adelaide website. Please note that an audio and visual recording is being taken of this meeting. This means that your presence at and any contribution you make to the meeting may be collected, used, disclosed or published publicly by the Council, including transferring outside Australia. As the time is past 8:30 p.m, I seek leave of the meeting to continue past this time. A show of hands? Leave granted. Council acknowledges that we're meeting on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains and pays respect to elders past and present. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land. We acknowledge that they are of continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today. And we also extend that respect to other Aboriginal language groups and other First Nations who are present today. We have a leave of absence, Councillor Cavada. I now seek a mover and seconder to move the 3rd of March minutes. Councillor Maher, and second, Councillor Freeman. All in favour? Carried. Okay, any conflict of interest? No, we have no deputations. Oh, sorry.
Yes, Chair, I will declare a conflict of interest at 7.2, which is the discussion of homelessness assistance, because I have a relative engaged in that sector and I have filled out the form. I will remain in the room and participate in the discussion and vote.
Thank you, Councillor Munn. It's a general conflict. Yes, thank you. We have no deputations, no workshops. We'll go straight into the reports. We have 7.1 Sustainability Incentive Scheme, Annual Report and Operating Guidelines Review, and I ask Sarah to open this and intro the item. And intro a new member, I believe.
Thank you through the chair. I will just introduce Christina Bilperio, who is our new team leader, low carbon and circular economy, and will be new to council members this evening.
Welcome.
So through the chair, the Sustainability Incentive Scheme, you would have seen a review a couple of times during the term of council. We have been bringing it in every year. This is the annual review that we're bringing back for your consideration this evening. We're providing an update on what the scheme has delivered, as well as proposing some amendments to the scheme for us to go live in 1 July.
Members. Councillor Freeman?
Yes, thank you, Chair. My question is about where am I? Sorry, can you scroll down, please, in the recommendation? Oh, sorry, no, it's in the discussion paper. It's the part that talks about making the scheme more available to larger buildings. So my read on that is it's for apartments. So I've received some feedback from people that live in apartments that they feel a level of inequity with incentives that the City of Adelaide provide because they don't have the same equal access to sunlight. They may not have a roof for solar panels. They may be overshadowed by buildings as well. And then similarly, the sort of incentives that are available to detached dwellings or semi-detached, they just don't have available to them. And I just wanted to understand, so the changes that we've proposed in here, how have we addressed those perceptions of inequity? Looking through the marked up operating guidelines, so all I can see that's changed in that regard is about, I've completely lost my spot, sorry. Where is it? The pre-commitment for bundled rebates for whole of buildings. So is that the only change that we've proposed?
Thank you, through the chair. So I will just draw members' attention to section 6, and there is a summary there of the changes that we're proposing. So a number of the changes for this round actually relate to the application process. Apartments are pretty well eligible across the suite of incentives, so really the changes this time are about making the process a little bit simpler, as well as simplifying some of the criteria. So in the past where you might have had to demonstrate additional elements to be eligible, we're removing some of those additional requirements, which will support additional applications for apartments.
Okay, so when we say improve access to, we're talking about the actual procedure. I guess to expand on that, what would be really useful as well is to see how we're reporting on the uptake of this scheme separated between detached dwellings and apartments, just to substantiate that claim that, well, there's not as many incentives available to people that are in apartments. And as well as improving access to incentives that we already have, I suppose I was expecting some consideration into additional incentives that maybe could help bridge that gap for people that are living in apartments, which is a style of living we're trying to significantly increase. So in summary, we really want people to feel like they're equally being considered by this council and have those opportunities to implement some sustainability measures. So that was a kind of a question and a comment.
Lord Mayor.
Can you please help me with the EV charging situation? You probably, excuse me, I've got to go back to my other seat. I can't speak anywhere else. Sorry about this. No, the new system. On page 3, the administration has completed an annual review of the SIS program, and the best performing incentives are for EV charging. We're currently in the middle of a fuel crisis, and it's impossible to charge EVs for most residents in the city. I don't regard going to a car park as a useful way to charge a car. And for anyone who lives in a house without off-street parking, there is absolutely no way they can do it. Though I do notice there are some people who have a lead going across their footpath with a doormat on it. This is not safe. I just wonder how many people in owner-occupied houses have been able to get an EV charging station with up to $10,000 supported as an on-street bollard.
Thank you for the question, through the chair. We have had, so far this year, 4 rebates for EV chargers. I don't have the breakdown of what type of home they were in. Don't believe any of them would have been on-street bollards for those without off-street parking. I will comment though, and sort of adds to the last question, that one of the things we have changed or proposing to change for the EV chargers is change the eligibility, as we know there are more products coming on the market that can solve some of the challenges, particularly in apartment complexes, not necessarily the residential piece, but we've tried to expand that criteria to allow for some of the new technologies that are coming onto the market to enable other dwellings to access that.
So it seems to me in the south of the city and parts of North Adelaide, there are residents who would love to have an electric car. I'm one of them. I have no off-street parking, and I'm deeply resentful that we have no mechanism that will allow me to use one. And we moved a motion 3 years ago to have on-street EV charging. I think we came up with 4 locations, and I can tell you I'm not going to drive my car to the other side of Sturt Street to charge it. I mean, it would not be unreasonable at this moment in time, which is a very particular pivot point, an inversion in people's lives, a global crisis. When people want to buy EV cars, everybody wants an EV car. Nobody's stupid enough to want a petrol car this week. And people like me have 32 kilowatts and a battery, and I can't charge a car, and it breaks my heart. And I think this is the time we should be sorting this out and finding a mechanism to have a bollard on the street. Maybe if there are 4 people in a street who have EV cars, but they can be used by anybody at various times, and particularly during the day. We've got energy to burn. I just think we've got to step up, and as a council, we should really deliver something that our residents want. Our residents want this, and we look at incentives for businesses, we have incentives for everyone, except residents.
I just want to say that I've asked this question because I've been bombarded by a lot of residents about this. I have been told that there is a report coming to council. Would you like to elaborate on that, Sarah?
Thank you, and through the chair, we do have an update on the EV roadmap coming in the next month. So council members will receive an update on the confidential contract negotiations that have been occurring around design, as well as updates on the residential component of that. Just going to the Lord Mayor's question, the intention of this round of revisions for the Sustainability Incentive Scheme is to open up and enable more of those options to be considered. So we're trying to put the incentive scheme in step with council's intention to have additional residential charges.
With due respect, I'm an ordinary resident and I want to do this, and seeing an incentive without knowing how to do it is not a good enough inducement for me, because I'm willing, I've got the investment already made. I think we've got to lift our game, because this is such an important moment. It's the one time when you can nudge people into sustainability, and everybody, even climate deniers, think it's a good idea. I mean, you don't get a point in time like this very often.
Councillor Stephen-Tree.
I've 2 questions. The first one actually builds on the Lord Mayor, and perhaps whether it's an undertaking for administration to consider. But picking up on the Lord Mayor's comment, there appears to be a gap between the EV chargers that are at the end of the street, where you can get a lot of cars coming in, or the ones that we've seen opposite the central markets, and then the cord across the footpath. And picking up on Lord Mayor's comment, are we able to have an undertaking to come back with information on what those types of solutions, whether it be a bollard or something else, that could be suitable in the council area if residents wanted that? Because it feels like there is a gap between what we're aspiring to do, which I understand we'll still continue to explore around EV charger stations, and then the cord across the curb. We need help fill that gap. So are we able to come back with information on how to fill that gap? Through that, presiding member, Ms Gilmore, could we incorporate some advice around those barriers in the upcoming report? So have to provide an undertaking to that effect.
And just to clarify, in addition to the barriers, it's specific examples of solutions that could be provided to bridge the gap? Yep. Great. Excellent. Thank you. Okay. And my second question is in relation to the criteria. So my recollection, and I don't know now whether it was last year or the year before, was around including the cost per tonne of carbon emissions reduction, which was great to see that added, because we're looking at bang for buck when it comes to emissions reduction. 2 questions in relation to that. One is, how often is that being applied, and how has it actually influenced what we're doing? And the second question would be, are we working towards having a threshold at some point? Because there will be a point where it actually doesn't make sense for us to continue to just keep paying for every last tonne of carbon, because we've got a lot of the low-hanging fruit, and so I'm curious as to where that threshold might be.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair, can confirm that the return on carbon is in the guidelines, so we did make that change last year. The way that we're dealing with it through this review is, while we've simplified some of the categories, a lot of the promotion and marketing is going to the electrification and to the incentives that do have good return on investment. So that's how we're managing the uptake of different incentive schemes as well, and largely targeting the strategic plan targets around electrification.
And so at the moment, though, we don't have a threshold in mind that we're working towards. There's not a gate as such whereby proposals have to meet a certain bare minimum level of, say, emissions reduction before we consider them.
Through the chair, thanks for the question. The simple answer is no. There's not a threshold that excludes you. What we have done through this review, though, is look to remove some of the incentive categories that don't have good return on investment.
Councillor Ma.
I have a question about the solar, not directly related to this, but have we got any consideration to adjacent developments? You know, you put solar on your roof and then someone builds a 30-storey building next door and solar's useless. Is that part of the consideration when we're approving an application for an incentive?
Thank you for the question, and through the chair, it's probably a little bit outside of the sustainability incentive scheme if it does require development approval. Obviously, it runs through a different process for that, so we refer to any approvals that are in place, but it's not done as a matter of course through the incentive program. That's not where the approval sits.
So would there be someone goes to all the effort of putting their solar in and then they lose the capacity for it to be useful because of an adjacent development? What then happens?
They have a right of it, through the presiding member, they have a right of objection through the planning.
Sure, I'm familiar with that, with the Crown and Anchor saying it unlikely to win that though. Is there something that we would then be on the hook for, morally, not necessarily legally, by approving a solar for a resident that they can't get any use out of?
We're not approving it.
Oh, sorry, assisting there, yeah.
Yeah. So, no.
No? Okay.
Councillor,
And regarding the residents with on-street parking permits for their bollards, that's something that could be wrapped into our curbside and parking management policy, which we're doing next year. It doesn't necessarily mean to be part of the policy, but there'd be an opportunity to incorporate some element of that in that policy. Perhaps you might need to work with Steve and Tom.
Thank you for the suggestion through the presiding member, but I think what we're trying to deal with here is a commitment around some further advice about improving the opportunities for EV charging solutions in residential properties. Let's get beyond the approval of the budget and the strategic project before we get to that.
Councillor Freeman. I thought we skipped you. Just to expand on what Councillor Steventry was saying about the undertaking to look at why EV charging is not being taken up and what the barriers might be. I mean, I would love that undertaking to include all of these initiatives and what the barriers are. So another one I've heard is that, yes, we provide an incentive for double glazing, but if you live above the first floor, good luck. How do you do that? There's no guidance on how that happens and the strata process you need to go through to make it happen. Similarly, we provide an incentive for trees to be planted, but that's not available for public land. So apartment residents do feel like the verge at the front of their apartment is their land, and it's not available to them. So I would really just like to understand, where do we want to get to and what are the barriers preventing us from getting there? I mean, I appreciate the updates that have been made and presented to us tonight, but it's not clear to me how we're going to bridge the gaps that we've already spoken about. And just finally, looking at the marked up version, so can I just understand, why has zero emissions transport been removed from the objectives?
Which one, sorry?
So if you look up the marked up version of the operating guidelines under incentives operation, the objectives have been edited and zero emissions transport has been removed. Page 35. Was that intentional?
Thank you for the question, and through the chair, I'll just refer, have members found that page? It's page 35 of the agenda and it's sort of midway down. There was a series of more than half a dozen dot points there in the objectives for the scheme. If I go to your earlier question as well, Councillor, the feedback that we've had through the scheme in the last 12 months has really been about simplifying some of the headline objectives, how to access the scheme, the kinds of documentation and the process you need to go through. So part of our attempt is to reduce the guidelines and what people actually need to consume to interact with the scheme. Certainly if you go to then what the incentives are, there are incentives that support some active travel type arrangements. Yeah.
Okay, sure. I guess I read these a little bit contradictory, but I appreciate what you're saying, Sarah. With the active travel incentives, I mean, that's another one. Yes, the e-bikes, that's great. There's a lot of people that probably don't want an e-bike. They want a cargo bike or they just want a bike in general. If we are serious about sustainable transport and people that live in the city have the greatest opportunity to increase that uptake, I'm wondering why we're not incentivising all forms. Scooters as well, e-bike charging, which is a lower wattage or whatever the metric is compared to EV charging. I'm surprised that hasn't been explored in here as well. I guess what I'm saying in summary is I think there's a few opportunities that we still haven't unpacked, and I'm a little bit nervous that this won't be reviewed again until 2029. And I personally would like to understand why those opportunities haven't been looked at.
Thank you for the question and through the chair. I might just take members back to the intention of the scheme. The overall intention of the scheme was to bridge a gap between the extra costs associated with new technologies. So what we've tried to do in reviewing, and each year that we look at those, we look at the technologies and what sort of an additional cost that residents or businesses might need to pay for a new technology. So something like a normal bicycle, we haven't included those types of incentives because it's assumed that that's a technology that's readily available. So we're trying to incentivise new technologies and moving into areas that are not currently well funded.
I've just got a question myself on that. Is a 4-year review cycle appropriate for a scheme operating in a fast, changing technology market? I mean, that just seems like...
Thank you for the question and through the chair. We're falling in under the funding policy for this one, which does require that all of the funding schemes are reviewed after the next council strategic plan. What we have seen with this particular incentive scheme is we have been in here every 12 months just to make tweaks and to respond to feedback that we have received each year. So it's not that it possibly won't be looked at again, it's just that the next scheduled review date would be at that time.
Councillor Martin.
Yes, and to take up Councillor Freeman's narrative a moment ago, but if we take out things like decarbonisation of transport, then you automatically exclude cargo bikes, bikes of that description, which are also contributing to fewer motorised trips and therefore a healthier environment. But there seem to be also in here some contradictions. For example, at page 50, we now require e-bikes in order to attract an incentive to require a statement from the owner that it will only be used for commuting. And yet, when it comes to EV charging of electric vehicles, we don't require any assurance that it'll only be used for commuting. People can take it to whatever they want. It just seems like a contradiction. And similarly, there are other contradictions in there. For example, we are removing incentives for rainwater tanks, but I might be wrong, things may have changed, but we still require new builds to include water tanks. So on the one hand, we're saying you must have it as a climate strategy in every new build, but we're not going to support anyone who wants to do it voluntarily as a means of assisting in, the climate battle. It's a bit of a contradiction. And then we're also saying to businesses where they previously were entitled to an incentive for green waste removal, that if you use a commercial contractor, you won't get an incentive. But we're going like hell to encourage people everywhere to use the green bins operated by the city as a means of reducing landfill. It just seems those things that they are contradicting the basic direction of the policy. So, you know, and correct me if I'm wrong, it just seems to me that in the rush to decomplicate or uncomplicate the incentives, we're actually embedding some contradictions, and to the point that was raised a moment ago, embedding them for some years. I mean, is there a way of dealing with these things so that we do have a consistent view about water tanks, about bikes, whether they're used for commuting or whatever, and the same with vehicles? And it just would seem to me to make much more sense. And throw into that disposable containers. I mean, we are running around telling people to take their refillable coffee cups every day when they get a coffee so as to reduce landfill, but we're also saying to businesses in here, no incentives anymore for any reusable container.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair. All of the things that you've just mentioned are good ideas. So what the incentive scheme, it's about a $230,000 funding pool. What we heard from council last year when we reviewed is to really target things that had emissions reduction. Some of those things that you've mentioned do, but they don't fall into the category of costing additional money. So we have really used a lens for these to say, does it have a carbon emissions benefit? Does it have good return on investment? And does it cost the applicant more money to implement that than something that they could readily buy on the market? So we're really trying to incentivise the things that hits council's targets around those pillars. So it's a combination of things. They're all great ideas, but largely we're seeing them implemented as mainstream. So we're trying to incentivise the things that might just need an extra nudge to get it across the line.
Councillor Giles.
On that point, and I'm also concerned about the 2029 timeframe because that just seems so far away and things are changing so rapidly in this space. But one of the things that really that doesn't exist in the current program, and it could be exactly what you just mentioned through the chair, which is about, you know, how do we sort of push things along, is about encouraging people to do things more collectively, like this. Having a block who's willing to put a bit of that, you know, put one battery between 4 houses or something like that, that collective response. That's, you know, more and more people living in the city. We've actually also seen real problems with old strata agreements where people have all had to do everything individually in an apartment block instead of looking at what possibilities and opportunities there is for doing a more collective approach to some of this stuff. So if we're not going to, you know, it would be really good to exploit some of that, see if we could pilot some of that, because particularly in relation to batteries and power, and also particularly in relation to greening. So 2029 is not going to be, you know, by then it'll be too late to do that. Sorry, that was a bit garbled because I'm really tired.
If I might, through the chair, suggest a way forward. There's been some very interesting ideas in terms of matters that this scheme might address, and I think there's been significant commentary about not reviewing the guidelines till 2029. I think that could be easily dealt with by a simple variation to the recommendation. The next program review will be in 2027. That follows your election. And what we can do prior to bringing a report in, workshop the item so that some of these magnificent ideas can be appropriately captured and incorporated into the revision of the guideline.
I think that's a great idea. I'm going to ask for a mover and seconder now. Move, Councillor Snape. You haven't been around for a while. Second, Lord Mayor. Would you like to speak to that? Either of you? No? Would anyone like to make further comment?
Summed up.
Summed up? Okay. All in favour? Carried. Oh, Lord Mayor, did you vote? You're a bit slow there. Oh, yeah, right. Slow. Okay, thank you, Christine, and welcome. And okay, welcome, Joe and Colleen. Okay, we've got the 7.2 extreme weather support for people sleeping rough. And Sarah, again, would you like to intro this?
Thank you for the chair. I'll just provide a quick headline and then Colleen will probably just add a little bit of detail. But this was a council decision in March where you requested we come back this month. So in the time frame that we've been allowed, we've done some consultation with people that are involved in the extreme weather response and those agencies. We haven't done as much reach out to other homelessness service providers that operate outside of the extreme weather response, but a lot of our views and content contained in the report relate to that consultation. So I'll just hand over to Colleen to provide some quick headlines.
Thank you, Sarah. Through the chair, and just to add to what Sarah's already mentioned, I think one key point is that we've worked with Department of Human Services to collect information from them, given that they currently lead the response across the whole of South Australia. And also, as you would have picked up in the report, that the extreme weather response led by DHS is currently under review, due for completion in 30 June. That hasn't really impacted on the ability for us to deliver the report, but it's just an important point, I guess, in terms of who's leading, who leads the response. The report answers 2 questions. So based on what we were asked to do in March, there was a request to consider accommodation or the provision of shelter. And then I guess the other aspect of that request was around safety. The conclusion from our engagement with DHS and the extreme weather service delivery partners, so that being Westcare and the Hutt Street Centre, is that within the CBD, emergency accommodation has sufficient capacity to meet the needs of adult men and women. That's being delivered primarily through Westcare. And in addition to the existing services which are outlined there in the recommendation, in terms of the safety of rough sleepers, we've proposed 4 actions that we think could actually just support and reinforce and strengthen some of the things that we already provide. So the expansion of care packs, an extreme weather response protocol we're suggesting, which would just outline the communications or ways to strengthen the communication. DHS indicated that that's happening in Ceduna already, like a concerted coordination response, which is seeing much more people accessing services, which I think is a positive. We had, between us drafting the report and it being published, we spoke to DHS again, and they have actually reached out to this organisation, Safe Pets, Safe Families, about how they could support people sleeping rough to look after their pet so that they can therefore access the accommodation that's already provided. And the last dot point you'll see there, and we've spoken about this in the chamber previously, is the advocacy around permanent supportive housing.
Members. Lord Mayor? Would you like to speak to it?
Just to say that it's Reconvened, fabulous piece of work, and I thank the staff for doing it such a quick turnaround, and thank Councillor Martin for his advocacy in the first place.
Councillor Martin?
Yes, Chair. Look, just to say that I have an alternative motion that I'd like to discuss with colleagues, which I would bring to council, given that it's 9:40 at night and my capacity to articulate anything much after 9 o'clock at night has all but left me. I will have that discussion with colleagues and bring something forward to council. That's my intention.
Yes, I agree. I have a few comments that I'll save as well. So I'll put this motion to a vote. All in favour? Against? Carried. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for tonight. Thank you. Oh, wait, one more. Oh, my God. But we're deferring it, I think.
Please just maintain it.
Oh, we've got to, okay, right.
Members, please stay in the room to maintain a quorum so that we can adjourn this meeting.
Yes, where the Lord Mayor goes, she went out.
She's gone home. She's gone home.
Too quick. Adjourning to proceed the council meeting on Tuesday, the 14th.
Members, welcome back to the special CFG meeting. We are going to look to now adjourn this meeting until the 14th of April, prior to the council meeting. I'm looking for a mover of that motion to adjourn. It's moved by Councillor Snape. The seconder was Councillor Giles. All those in favour? Declare that carried. Thank you, members. We'll adjourn the meeting until the 14th.